Today we got some notes on your own paper. So get out a blank sheet of paper. We're going to be doing some notes on first reviewing random numbers and then some more string methods, because we're going to have to use both of those ideas in the next activity we're going to do. After this, we're going to have it's called a lab, a Magpie lab. It's kind of like a case study, and we'll talk more about that in the next video. But these notes will get you ready for that. So if you want to put a title this Random Numbers and String Methods. Okay, now I know you've dealt with random numbers a few times, so this first part is going to be a little bit of review. We haven't had to use them from what I can remember since the guessing game program. Some of you might have done them with the histogram bonus, but assuming you haven't seen this in a while, to make a random number, we use math.random. And math.random returns a double. And if you remember, the range of doubles that it returns, it can include 0, anything up to but not including 1. So you get some big long decimal between 0 and 1. All right, so let's say I wanted to make a random integer from 1 to 10. If I start with double x equals math.random, I'm going to get a number between 0 and 1, like I just said. So x will be some number greater than or equal to 0, but less than 1. So if my goal is to get a number between 1 and 10, I'm going to multiply that by 10. So if I did a new double, called it double y, I could do x times 10, and that would give me a number between 0 and 10. So I'm basically multiplying this by 10, multiplying this by 10. That's what multiplying x by 10 would be. But I really wanted it to be a random number from 1 to 10. So what I did there is I would add 1. So double z would be y plus 1. So if I add 1 at that next step, you'd get this, be 1 less than or equal to x less than 11. So now it can be 1. Not including 11 means 1 to 10 is all I'm going to get. But finally, if I need to make it a random integer, I could say int, so I guess I'll just use a. I ran out of letters. We cast the last thing we got as an integer. And now I'll get a random integer. Okay? So if you want to, let me type this into Eclipse just so you can see the progression. Okay, so I've literally just typed everything into Eclipse I just showed you. Normally we wouldn't do it in multiple stages like this. I just want to show you what each step is doing. So there's what math.random gives us. If I multiply that by 10, I get that number. I can only get numbers between 0 less than 1. So if I add 1 to it, now the lowest thing I can get is 1, the highest thing I can get is 10, which I got this time. And then I cast that as an int so that it lops off this decimal. And you can see as I run it a few times, there's one where I ended up with a random number of 5. There's 4. There's 8. And I'm getting all numbers between 1 and 10. Now, generally, we wouldn't do all of these steps. So typically, if I want to make a number between 1 and 10, this is what I would do. to get a random number between 1 and 10. In one line, I would say something like int rand equals cast as an int math.random times 10 plus 1. Okay, so I'm doing everything I set up here. Find math.random, multiply it by 10, add 1, cast it as an int. But you would do it all in one line. So that's how you get a random number between 1 and 10. Okay, so just remember that. You're going to need to make a random number at some point in the next thing that we do. All right, so that was your quick review. Here's the new stuff. Now we're going to start talking about string methods. Now we've done a couple string methods already, and we'll get to those in a second. But before we get into the new type, first thing I want to talk about is, and I always have trouble saying this word, the concatenation operator. Concatenation. And basically this is just a soup fancy word to mean string putter together. So you can put together multiple strings and make one bigger string. So for example, let's say we had string A equals the word red. And let's make string B equal the word Raiders. If I made string C equal to A plus a space plus B, then the effect would be that C would be the one string that would say Red Raiders with a space in the middle. I think we may have even done that in a program earlier where I put the first and last name together. I'm thinking of something early on in Comp Sci 2 maybe. Maybe I'm wrong. But it's kind of just a nice way to make one variable if you're going to make something that always goes together. Another thing that the string concatenation operator is good for is that you can actually use it with for loops. So let's say I'm going to make a variable called string output. And initially it's just going to be empty. So it's an empty string. Now in the last program, histogram, you had to print out a certain number of stars based on the frequency in the frequency array. You could have made one string to print out however many stars you needed to. For example, we could have done a for loop, and I've seen people do this in the past. Not sure if anyone did it this year or not, but if I said int I equals 1, I is less than or equal to 5, let's say I want to do 5 stars, I plus plus, then I could just say output plus equals a star, in quotes, because it's a string. And then after the for loop, if I said system.out.print output, then the result would be that your output, you'd see 5 stars print out. And that's just a little bit better than printing out 1 star at a time in a for loop, because then you have to worry about the ln issue and when you want to put a new line. This way I could just say system.out.print ln right away, print my 5 stars, and be done with it. Okay, so that's the string concatenation operator. Any questions on that, please call me over. All right, so now we want to talk about some additional string methods. I'm going to start a new page for this one. So additional string methods. Now there's a couple that we know already, so I'm going to start with ones we know. And you maybe haven't used these in a little bit, but you should have used these at some point in comp sci. We have the dot length, which tells you, with double parentheses for strings, tells you how many characters are in a certain string. And I put a blank here because remember, if it's called like string output, then you put output dot length. If it's string A, then you put A dot length. If it's string str, you put str dot length. So whatever string variable name you're talking about, dot length will tell you how many characters are in it. The other one you know is whatever dot char at. And you had to use that in code check. And you had to put an int that represented the index of the spot you were looking for, what character was at that spot. So remember with code check, you had those long account numbers, and you said like account num.char at 0, that would give you the first number, or account num.char at 1 would give you the second number. You might need those in the next couple days also, so just be aware that those still exist. But the new methods that you haven't seen before, that you're going to need, the first one is the whatever the string is called dot substring method. And a substring you want to think of as a piece of the string. So rather than just grabbing one individual character, you might be grabbing multiple characters. And even within this, there's actually two ways to use it. So there's whatever dot substring with one parameter, which is going to be int start index. And what that does is it returns a substring from start index and just goes all the way to the end of the string. So it returns a substring from start index to the end of the string. Okay, so let's do an example. Let's say I had string str equals airport. If I said system.out.print str.substring4, what do you think would print out? Okay, well 4 is the start index, and remember how indexes work? If this my string is fairport, this is index 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, so P is at index 4. So it's going to start from index 4 and just go to the end of the string. So you would get port to print out. Okay, so that's if you have substring with just one integer parameter, it goes from that index to the end. You might be able to guess what the other way to do it is, because maybe you want like the middle of a string or something. Then you can do whatever the string is called, dot substring, with two integer parameters. The first one is int start index, and the second one is int end index. Now, this is a little misleading to me. Start index, that's the first place you're starting. The way this is written, it's a little annoying. End index is the first spot you don't want. So this is the first character you don't want to include. I'll give you an example to show you what I mean with that as well. So first off, basically what this does is it returns a substring. From start index to end index -1. Like I said, this is the spot that you don't want. So it's going to end at end index -1. So if I still use that string Fairport as my example from before, if I said system.out.print or just str.substring, if I did 1,4, what do you think that would equal? Well, it would start at 1, space 1 is the A, it would go all the way up and stop just before it gets to 4. So it would stop at the R. So you can see the word air. Put that in a system.out.print. Okay, so with the substring method, there's a couple ways you can get errors. You can probably guess what they might be. If you put negative numbers in as indices, that just doesn't make any sense. So don't put negative number indices. Or if you put an index that's greater than the length, equal to the length is okay. So even if like fairport.length, str.length here would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it would be 8, even though it only goes up to index 7. If you asked for index 8, it would just give you an empty string. But if it's bigger than the length, then you're going to get an error. And then the other way you're going to get an error is if, in that second way of using it, if your start index is greater than your end index. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so that's how you would use the substring method. Questions on that? Make a note or call me over. The other string method we need to talk about is the whatever the string is called, .index of. And the parameter for index of is actually another string. So I'm just going to say string s. And this is returning an index, so it's returning an int. And the int is the index of the first occurrence. Index of the first occurrence of whatever that parameter s is. First occurrence of s in the given string. Any guess what it might return if the thing you're looking for isn't in the string? Well, it would need to be an index that couldn't exist. That would mean not in there. So it returns -1 if it's not in the string. Returns -1 if not in string. Okay, so we're going to do a bunch of examples in a second, but if I just do one more example with that string Fairport, if I said str.index of, let's say if I wanted to find where rport was. I don't know why I'd want to find where rport was, but let's say I did. It would be where rport, the index where rport starts in str. So if you look back at str, there's rport. and it's at spot 0, 1, 2. The R is at space 3. So R port starts at space 3, which means this would return 3. Okay. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Let's do one final page of a bunch of different examples to make sure you've got all this. So I'm going to start a new page one more time. If you can squeeze it in, if you've got room, by all means. But here's my last section here. So some examples. I'm going to make a few strings. Let's say string S1 is called unhappy. A little depressing. String S2 is cold, because while you're watching this, it's probably pretty cold outside. I'm doing it in January, but it's I'm doing it in August here, this video, but it's a frosty 56 this morning. Okay, string S3 will be strawberry, because I had some strawberries yesterday. And, string S4, this is a weird one, is one word, dead bird. I think the reason that one's in here is because when I originally made these notes, I walked into the comp sci room one day and there was a dead bird sitting at the door. Not really what I wanted to see at 6:30 on a school day, but you roll with it. Okay, so those are my different strings. So I'm going to do a bunch of different examples, see if you can figure these out. What if I said S1 dot substring two? What do you think that would print out? Well, it would do it would look at S1, which is unhappy. This is index 0, that's 1, there's 2. Remember, when there's just one integer in there, it starts at that spot and gives you the string from there to the end. So unhappy turns happy. Okay, next one, S2 dot substring 4. So cold is S2. That has 0, 1, 2, 3 for indices, but 4 is not an error. This is what I was trying to say. I'm going to flip back real quick. This is what I was trying to say about index. If the index is greater than the length, it's an error, but not if it's equal to. The length of cold is 4, so 4 is equal to the length. There's no letter at space 4, but it would return just an empty string. Not an error. So nothing would print out, but it wouldn't say error. That's supposed to just be 2 quotation marks next to each other with nothing inside it. Okay, but if I did S2 dot substring 5, what would happen then? That would give you an error, because 5 is bigger than the length of S2. So an error would return. Okay. What if I said S3 dot substring 5, 7? Well, we go to strawberry, find where index 5 is. Here's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it'd start with B. And remember, 7 is the first one I don't want. So all I would get, I'd start at B, I'd get the E. It wouldn't give me the R in berry because 7 is the first one I don't want. So I just get B. All right, how about S4 dot substring? Think about that one for a second. What would you get? Hopefully you're counting out in S4. This is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the B in bird is where this is starting. 5, 6, 7. Okay, so you're probably either thinking error, but it's not an error because dead bird has an index length of 8. So 8's the first spot I don't want. So it'll give me through 7, which is okay. Answer should have been bird. Okay, what about S4 dot substring 4, 9? That would be an error because there's no, it would need to give me through space 8, and there's no space 8. And how about S4 dot substring 5, 4? Hopefully you're thinking right away that doesn't make sense. We can't start at 5 and end at 4. So it doesn't work to go backwards. That's the other type of error, when your end index is less than your start index. Okay, so there's a bunch of examples with substring. Let's just do a couple with index of, and then we'll be done. So I'm going to make a new string. I'm calling just regular S, and we're going to make string S funny farm. Okay, so let's say I said int x equals s dot index of farm. So index of finds where the first occurrence of farm occurs in funny farm. So I'd have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so 5 is where farm starts. So this will give me back 5, or x would be equal to 5. What if I just said int y equals s dot index of just n? Well, n occurs twice in funny farm at 2 and 3. Index of gives you back the first occurrence. So this is going to give you 2. First one it finds, it's going to return. Okay, how about int z equals s dot index of farmer? Well, even though farm is in S, funny farm, farmer is not. So since farmer isn't completely in string S, you're going to get -1 back, which just means there is no farmer in funny farm. And just for good measure, just to make sure you know what we're talking about, if I said int a equals s dot length, what would you get back? We'd have to count how many characters are in funny farm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The length is 9. Even though the index only goes 0 through 8. All right, so that's the end of these notes. You're going to need those when you do the Magpie lab, which I'll introduce in the next video. But that's all for today. Thanks for watching.